We're all tired of talking about slavery. Instead, let's talk about how white people continue to oppress black people after slavery. One thing a lot of people probably aren't aware of is the fact that banks were denying mortgages to black people. They still believed in these racist ideologies of black people being violent, dirty. Somehow they were turning it into the fact that they didn't believe that they worked harder than white people, which, like, so interesting. They also knew that they were systematically stopping black people from getting specific jobs, so they didn't believe that the jobs they were going to be able to obtain would be able to cover the cost of a mortgage. So they would just deny them mortgages. I also want to note, because I left this part out, that they were also being denied mortgages other places. So if they wanted to get a better job and, move into a nicer area where the education was better, they had better access to health care, better access to healthy foods, they would be denied mortgages to go into those places as well. And then if they still wanted to keep that job, they ended up having to commute, and they just ended up spending more money to try to make more money, and again, had to work twice as hard as their white counterparts to try to get ahead. And they didn't only do this to black people, they also did it to white people. A lot of the time, these areas that were predominantly black were cheaper in cost in comparison to the other neighborhoods, which we still see this today. So a lot of white people that couldn't afford other neighborhoods would try to move into these areas, and because these people didn't want these areas to not be segregated. They wanted them to be segregated, but they also, again, had these racist ideologies, so they didn't want to give white people the ability to move into these areas either. So they were denying white people mortgages, they were denying black people mortgages, and the other reason why a lot of the infrastructure in these areas would deteriorate is because a lot of black people, because they were being denied mortgages, would end up doubling up in their homes. So instead of, a single family living in a single family home, they would have 2-3 families living in one household, because that was the only way that they could afford it and get it approved for a place to live. This was another way that black people were unable to build generational wealth, because you only had one whole family unit instead of like for my family, my mom, my aunt, my grandma, all of their siblings and whatnot, they all have their own homes. But back then, black families didn't have, everyone having their own little household and being able to have all of that amount of wealth, in their family. Instead, there was only one house, and they all shared that one singular house. And then by the time, if somebody were to pass away, the property values usually weren't as good, because there's a lot more wear and tear on a home the more people you have living inside of it. And for two, once that wealth gets distributed, it's different than having, one home going to one person and that home be worth, $100,000, than to have to split the cost of that home between 10 different people, and now each person gets $10,000, whereas one person could have got $100,000. Of course, this also made their schooling systems deteriorate as well, because property taxes is what was funding our education system, and still is. And because there wasn't a lot of homes that were being bought because they were being denied mortgages, they also weren't having a lot of money going to their school systems. To this day, we see that a lot of communities that were once redlined and blatantly redlined, even though they, took away Jim Crow laws, those areas still end up being 80% black, 20% white, and it's a result of that, because we've never drew the lines. We aren't doing anything to, bring essentially, wealthy white people into these areas, and everything's staying the same.